Welcome to Monday Morning Quarterback, a weekly feature from Cannon Church in Snellville, Georgia. I'm Tim Emmett, senior pastor at Cannon, and on Monday mornings we connect the message from Sunday, the game of football, and the week ahead. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 7. December 26, 1976, the day after Christmas. It should have been a great day, should have been a day filled with joy. Instead, it was a terrible day. My family went to the home of some friends of ours for dessert. I walked through the door with my family. Mr. Rob took one look at me and asked how I was. I was so upset I couldn't speak up. My dad spoke up for me instead and said, "He's not doing well. The Steelers lost." I was wearing my Steeler jacket, and the Steelers had just lost the AFC Championship game. They lost the opportunity to go to their third straight Super Bowl, lost the opportunity to win their third straight Super Bowl. Worst of all, they lost that AFC Championship game to the Oakland Raiders, the hated Raiders, the terrible Raiders. As you may know, the Raiders of the 70s were notorious. They were the bad guys in black, silver and black. They liked being disliked, to quote their quarterback, Ken Stabler. They were notoriously violent. They didn't just want to dominate you, they actually wanted to hurt you. Their defensive backs had nicknames like the Assassin and Dr. Death. One of their safeties, George Atkinson, was infamous for blindsiding, clubbing opposing teams' players, receivers. He knocked Lynn Swann from the Steelers out of several games, knocked him out cold by just cold cocking him from behind. They were that kind of team. One of their linebackers, before every game, had one of their trainers put what amounted to casts in his hands, under his pads, as well as on his arms, so that he could club opposing players, give him a forearm to the helmet, knock the helmet off so he could punish them physically, hurt them. He's actually, that same linebacker has boasted that he loved fighting, couldn't help himself, looked for opportunities to get into fights with opposing teams' players.
Nobody enjoyed a good Donnybrook more than sixth-year linebacker Phil Villapiano.
I just like to fight. I just could not stop myself. I went to Bowling Green. If I threw a punch, they sent me back to New Jersey. When I was with the Raiders, if I threw a punch, that was good, as long as it was at the right guy.
One of their offensive linemen had a fake broken thumb for 6 straight years, would have a massive cast on his thumb before every single game so that he could ram it into the stomach of opposing defensive linemen. Their other offensive linemen would always sort of match the pads and wraps on their hands and their arms to the jerseys of the opposing team. If the opposing team was wearing white jerseys, they'd wear white pads and wraps. If they were wearing dark jerseys, they wear black pads and wraps. Why? So the officials couldn't see that they were holding on every single play. Are you getting the picture? The Raiders were evil. They weren't just bad. They were terrible people playing professional football. In other words, they were exactly the kind of people that Jesus loved to be with.
Now you have officially carried it too far, buddy.
This past Sunday, we continued our series, Please Don't Be My Neighbor. It's a series on loving our neighbors as ourselves. It's a series really about the resistance we face within us and around us to loving our neighbors as ourselves. Pastor Heather preached on religion or love. Sometimes our religion gets in the way of loving our neighbors. In Mark chapter 2, Jesus calls Levi, a tax collector, to follow him. And then Levi, having said yes, throws a party for Jesus, a dinner for Jesus and his disciples. The dinner guests are Jesus, his disciples, Levi, and his friends, who are described by Mark as tax collectors and sinners. Now, when the New Testament, the Gospels in the New Testament describe people as sinners, it's not a euphemism for people. We tend to think that as Christians because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's what it says in Romans, and many Christians know that verse, and so when they see sinners, they think people. But that's not what Mark meant. When he labeled a group of people, when he labeled Levi's friends as sinners, what he meant was they were notorious sinners. They were shameless sinners. They were irreligious and immoral. Tax collectors were in league with Rome, with the Roman occupiers, with the foreigners who were exploiting and violently suppressing the people of God. In other words, sinners were not your normal neighbors. They were the Raiders. They played dirty, and they were proud of it. And here Jesus was breaking bread with them. He's challenged by religious people, by the Pharisees, the holiest of the holy in that time and place, why he could possibly be breaking bread, sharing a table with Levi and his friends, with tax collectors and sinners. Jesus says, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I've come not to call the righteous, but sinners. There is, in some Christian traditions, something called the doctrine of separation. The idea is, if we want to be devoted to God, if we want to be faithful to God, we must separate ourselves from everything and everyone we deem unholy, unrighteous, immoral, irreligious. It's really inspired by the refrain in the book of Leviticus, to be holy, for the Lord your God is holy. But in Jesus we see that holiness now means, because the kingdom of God has come through Jesus, holiness now means not separating from, but going to. It's engaging the world, not withdrawing from the world. The holiness of Jesus, the holiness of love, is itself contagious, and it reaches out and leans in and goes toward the world in its hurt, in its pain, its injustice, and its violence. We're invited not to pull back from the world, but instead to go toward the world in mercy and in love. Remembering, of course, that sinners really does, in the end, apply to us as well. So what's the game plan for this week? Well, it's pretty simple. Follow Jesus, not the Pharisees. Don't pull back from the world around you. Instead, go toward the world in love. That's the game plan for this week. I hope you have a great week.